Carolyn Dube here. Oh, what's the play for today? Well, today it involves rainbows and stencils. Now, this is the reflecting rainbow stencil that can be used to make this rainbow really easily. And you might be thinking, hey, I know all of Carolyn's stencils and I don't know this one. Well, that's because it was just released over at StencilGirl Products. Now, this I designed to make the rainbow. I expected it to do that, but there was something that this stencil can do that took me by surprise, and I actually think I love it as much as I love making rainbows with it, and I'm going to be sharing that with you in this video. I'm also going to share with you all of the other stencils being released and some things that you can make with those. So grab a cup of coffee and join me for a little bit of rainbow play. Start by placing the stencil wherever you want it on your paper. And you can start with any side of the stencil, it doesn't matter. Just stick it down and then grab some paint. Now I meant to dip my brush ever so lightly in the paint to have a small amount on there, but I didn't judge what my hand was doing very well. And I actually have a lot of paint there. So notice how the solid coverage is. And I actually don't want that for the look I'm going for. So what I'm going to do is grab a piece of paper and just wipe off some of that excess paint. What I'm going for here is more of a stippled look, so that's why a little bit drier brush is handy for that. Now I just went through this with the pink, and guess what we're about to have to do with the orange? Yep, I put way too much paint on that brush too, so I had to wipe a little bit of it off. When you're using the stencil, you have the flexibility to stay within the lines or not. And I'm very purposely not staying within the lines here. Now, why would I do that? Because that's going to create some great subtle color variation. That little bit of orange that went beyond its borders into the yellow, that's going to create just a little bit of shading, a little bit of interest there, so it's not just one single solid color. Now the brushes, by the way, that I'm using here, these are not special fancy stenciling brushes. These are preschool kids paint brushes. They're round, they've got these really firm bristles, and I love them. The only thing about using cheap kids brushes is sometimes when you get them, you need to trim up the ends of them with a pair of scissors just to even out the bristles. But other than that, these things can take so much abuse and last forever. You can find these in a kids section of an art supply store, or I'll have a link down below with all the supplies of where you can find something like this online. This is an extremely forgiving process. You see where the arrow is pointing? I've got a little more blue there than what I want. So all I'm going to do is bring some green on top of it and blend it in. And when I lift up the stencil, what I will have is a single layer rainbow, and it is a fun rainbow. But with this stencil, you can take it up a notch and make it a double layer rainbow. Now I'm going to put the stencil back about where it was, because basically after you finish that first layer, all you do is give the stencil a flip. That's all it takes. And now what it's going to do is mask off those painted areas. So those will protect them as we bring in more color that will fill in all of that white space. Now I am lining this one up very carefully to make sure it's precisely on top of the color that I already had on the page. But guess what? You don't have to do it that carefully. You get some cool looks if you actually nudge it just a little off. And after I'm done making this rainbow, I'll show you what that looks like. Same process of adding the paint by just stippling it on, going beyond the edges, letting some of the colors spread here and there. Right there, I just added a little pink around that orange. Even though I didn't put pink as the first color, I started with orange, I did stipple just a little bit of pink to add some interest there. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, you started with pink on the first rainbow that you did in this video. Why not pink here? Well, it's for how I want the colors to layer, how they look when it's all done. And these are the colors that I liked how it played together. But guess what? You can do it in any order, any colors that you want. In fact, this is even a cool look just using two colors to do this. There are so many possibilities with this stencil, and it's impossible for me to get them all in one video here. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button. That way you know as soon as I've got a new video out. On this rainbow, I'm doing teal and purple. Where on the first rainbow, I just did the blue. Now, of course, you can do any color combination you want on here. But if you're looking to do the exact same colors that I'm doing in the order that I'm doing them, I have got a bit of a cheat sheet for you. I've got a photo over on the blog that labels which color goes in which spot on both layers of the rainbow. And this is, again, a very forgiving process. So if you feel like, oh, I want a little bit more green on here, all you do is put a little more green on there. It's really all you have to do. The purple that I'm using here, I absolutely love this purple, but for whatever reason, when I saw it here on this rainbow, I thought, nah, I want a little more blue to it. And since that's such an easy thing to fix here, I'll bet you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab the brush that has blue paint on it and add just a little bit to it. If you've got an eagle eye, you might have noticed that I've got a different brush for each color of paint. I do that because that way I can keep the colors pure, and anytime I want to add a little touch of a color, I can just grab that brush. So remember how I put the purple down, then the blue? Well, now I'm putting a little more purple back on top of it to quiet down that blue. Now that I've got the colors the way I want them, it's time to reveal that rainbow. Let's talk about those little hints of white there in between the rays. That subtle little touch that I absolutely love with this. Well, there are some things you can do with that. I've got 3 different rainbows here that were done using the same technique. Now the bottom one, that's the one you just saw me make. When I flipped the stencil over, I very carefully lined up the rainbow to mask off the paint that was already on there. And that created those kind of lines. But here on this next one, it was a little off. Things weren't lined up quite as carefully. And then on this top one, it was nudged up just a bit. And so you can see how you can create more and more of those white areas depending on how carefully you line up the stencil after you flip it. This isn't the only thing the stencil can do. I found a completely different way to use it. It gives you a very different look, a much more abstract rainbows kind of feeling to it. And it's where you can change the width of things. Well, it's too hard for me to explain. Let me show you what I mean. Take the edge of whatever paper you're using and tuck it underneath, in between, around some of the rays so that some are behind the paper and some are on top of it. And then you can basically reconfigure the height or the size of the different rays. This time, I want to stay within the lines. So that's why I chose to use a cosmetic sponge. It's easier for me to stay within those lines so that I'm just adding that black paint inside these shapes to create the abstract rainbow kind of vibe. I'm going with black paint on this, and I want a really dark, solid black. So I'm touching up any areas where I can still kind of see the white index card showing. Then I'm going to lift up the stencil a little bit and then pull the index card out. Now, is that the only combination that you can do with this? Absolutely not. Depending on which parts you put over or under the paper will determine how wide the different rays are. So for this one, I'm going to make a really big wide one for the top and then some really little ones down at the bottom. This is just the tip of the iceberg for all the different combinations that you can make using the stencil. And yes, I will have another video out in the future showing you more ways that you can use this, different ways to combine it, because I have been having so much fun playing around with this technique on index cards. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not, but those are 4x6 size index cards that I'm using here. Not only do you have all of the options of the different configurations to do, then it's how you put them together on the index card. So for this one, having 2 of them on here gives me a completely different vibe than doing just one or doing the traditional rainbow with it. I love how stencils give you all sorts of options and flexibility. Now let's dive into the other stencils that have just been released. This one is called Reflecting Rainbows, and I've got a bit of a confession to make with this one. You can take individual rows of the rainbows and create a scallop pattern. A little bit, a lot, or fill an entire page with it. Grab some watercolors or felt tip markers or colored pencils and add some color to the patterns. These strips of pattern were created using the same technique that you saw me do earlier in this video with index cards with the larger reflecting rainbows. Now this is where I need to do a little confession, because as you look at this, you're like, okay, these are little reflecting rainbows. It should work exactly the same as the big one. Yes and no. So let's say you've put the stencil down and you've stenciled a color. Say like right here, I've stenciled the blue. Then when you take the stencil and give it the flip, only 4 of them will line back up. The 4 in the center, those will line up just the way the big one does, but the other ones on the edges do not line up in the same way. So why doesn't the whole pattern line up the way common sense would say it should? I got no good reason for you. It's just one of those quirks of the way this stencil came together. I love to incorporate words into the play, so I created this stencil of rainbow quotes. Now the next 2 stencils, they have to do with strong women. This first silhouette represents that young child, the power of innocence, the way imagination has no boundaries when you're a kid. This next silhouette represents that adulthood, that getting stuff done, having to put on your cape and be that superhero to just manage everything that you have to. And then the last silhouette, this is the wise woman standing there with confidence, owning the wisdom that she has earned through all of her experiences. And then there is a stencil of words to go with those strong women. This one is called Heroic Women. And these are all sorts of words that you might want to put with heroes. And then also at the bottom, there is an alphabet. So if you want to build your own word to add to these, or if you want to put an ending on any of the words, like if you want an end S or an ED, that kind of thing, you have that flexibility. If you've ever made a colorful, fun background and wondered what you can do with it, try using a mask with it, because that's what I've been doing here with these pieces with these strong women. Whenever you've got a word stencil, you can use it for the words, and you can also use it as a design element. So here, just cleaning up on these scrap papers, I've just done some loose stenciling to create some fun background papers to use. These stencils and all of the ones that I've designed are available over at StencilGirlProducts.com. Now, if you want to know more about stencils, because this is all just the tip of the iceberg of what they can do, then check out my online workshop, The Joy of Stenciling. Well, thanks so much for being here. I so appreciate you spending this time. If you've been enjoying this video, I'd so appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you know of somebody that you think would enjoy stenciling, share this video with them so they can join in the fun too. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.